Recording in progress. Okay, we are we are holding on page Zion, the third page from the copies. Am I correct? Did I get this right? Maybe I didn't get this right. Hold on. Let me see. No, I'm sorry. We're holding page Ches, the fourth page of the copies. Line 6, second paragraph. And we were talking about the idea of shoftim v'shoitrim titnu l'chad b'chol sha'arecha, the level of sha'arecha, the level of the gates that's going on the hamshachet that comes from moichid to midas. That's what's the idea of the chamishim share bina, just like a gate is mamshich from above to below. We brought that from the idea of noida b'sha'arim baila, that Hashem is known b'sha'arim, that through the levels of the gates, that is how Hashem becomes known, or in a way of hash'ara, that through a way of that it's estimated. It's not yediyas hamahus or sags hamahus. It's yediyas hametzias. We only know about Hashem, or when He's known in a way of a tzimtzum through the spheres. We explained those two explanations in the Zohar, how the Eibishter can be known if He's Ein Sof. And this is the idea of there's two types of ways of hamshachas. There's the hamshacha of seichel into midos. That is the idea of the chamishim share bina, both in oil misal yoinim and the spheres and down here by yaths. And before there could be the drawing down of the seichel into midos, there also has to be the elevation, the halas hamidas, to the level of seichel. And even higher than that, there's the idea of the shloish meshtayim nesivus chachma. There's a 32 paths of chachma that we're drawing down from chachma, and even higher than chachma. The ratzon that's higher than seichel are drawn down through the shloish meshtayim nesivus chachma into bina. So that is essentially what we were talking about. The idea to connect it with koil, shaitim titnu chad b'koil sha'arecha, or b'chol sha'arecha, the level of 50, that there's 50 gates, and that has to do also with the noida b'sha'arim baila, and which is a further step lower than the lamed beis nesivus hachachma. Now we're going to connect it, interestingly, to something from last week's Haftarah that we actually spoke about in last week's Maimer. He says in line 6, fourth page of the copies. This is also what it says in the pasuk. I will make your windows from kadkoid, and your gates will be like fiery stones. We'll soon explain what the exact meaning of ekdoch means, or flaming stones. And all your boundaries will be made of desirous stones, like precious stones and so on. So he says, Sha'ariich, he's not going into something called Kishim Shesayich. That was last week's Maimer. We want to connect the Sha'ariich aspect of what we're talking about, also the Noida B'Sha'arim Baila and Shoftim B'Shoitrim Titnu L'chad B'chol Sha'arecha. So he says, Sha'ariich Hem Chamishim Sha'ar Bina. Sha'ariich is going on the 50 gates of Bina. She'in Yonam Hu Liyos Nimshachim B'Midas. Because the purpose of the Sha'arim is what enables and draws down from Bina, should come down into the Midas. Shezehu Avnei Ekdach. The idea of the Midas are Avnei Ekdach. What does Midas have to do with stones of flaming fire? Ekdach u'malashon ki eish kadcha. It's the word Ekdach is in the word eish kadcha or k'gdoyach eish. These are all flaming fire. In Islavus on Midas, the idea of the flame and the excitement and the passion of the Midas. So that's what it means that it says that I will make your she'arayich to Avnei Ekdach, from through the she'arim, through these 50 gates of Bina, it will come down into the level of the flaming fire of the Midas. Additional to this, and all your boundaries will be like desirous stones. Kol Givulech, all the boundaries, Koyal Chamishim Shari Bina Shem Bagbol. These are going on the 50 gates of Bina, that they are limited. It's a little bit different than last week's Maimer. In last week's Maimer, we spoke about Kol Givulech is going on the Nesivois, on the paths of Chachma. But over here, he's talking about, and why? Because they're limited. But here he's talking about the same idea of limitation he's applying to the 50 gates of Bina. But it's not just enough to have the 50 gates of Bina, but hem tzarech lahamshich la'achid oisem b'chinas avnei chayfetz shu'in nesivus ha'chachma, and in those 50 gates of Bina, that's not enough. We don't need to stop by that, but we also have to have, like we said, the level of the 32 Nesivus HaChachma, that is the stones of desire. The connection with the stones of desire is last week we spoke about, because the desire has to do with a level that's higher than Seichel. That Seichel is rooted in. It's a Pnimius Abba, Pnimius Atik, so therefore it has to do with the desire of Tainug and Ratzon that's higher than intellect, which we just now said is the purpose of the 32 paths of Chachma. So now he connects it back to our parsha. What does all of this have to do with our parsha? Namshach of the Moichin and Midas, Namshach of the Ratzon that's higher than Seichel into Seichel. So he says in Ois Gimel line 16, V'zeu shoftim v'shaytim titn l'cha b'chol שעריך. That's where it says, judges and officers you shall place in all your gates. At the idea of placing officers and judges on your gates. What is that in a person's service today? It's referring to the gates that's to be found in a person's body. There are also gates. As it's brought down, the body has 7 gates as well. Keneged Sheva ha'oisius bagad kafras. There are 7 oisius which are called kafulos. This is where the term kafulos in Tanya concerning Midas comes from. Shem Sheva kafulos. There are 7 letters in the Aleph Beis that have a hard and soft sound. Beis, Veis, Chaf and Kaf, Taf and Sof, Pei and Fei. Reish, Gimel, and Daled also have it. We just are not familiar with it. Some communities know the difference between a Gimel and a Daled and a Dagish and Rafa. But anyway, the point is that these letters, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, correspond to the 7 gates that are in the body of a person. What are those gates? The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth. Altogether, it comes out 7. Why are they called gates? Because in and through the gates, the person connects with the outside world. Through the eyes, through the ears, and so on, there is a connection made, and he communicates and he transmits outward, and also it's a two-way connection. Both he receives, he takes in from the outside into himself through these 7 gates, and also he gives out through these 7 gates outward into the world. So now, since it's possible that these gates can be used also by klippos, that's on the opposite side in Kedushim, therefore we need to be warned. Do not go astray after your heart and after your eyes. Like Chazal say, the eyes see and the heart desires. These become 2 brokers of Aveda, the Chazal say. So therefore one needs to have a protection by the gates, just like in a physical sense. An army needs to put a protection out at the gate of the world in general, of their city or their country to protect invaders from coming in. The same thing, we need to make sure that the clippers do not make use of our gates. So he says in line 29, on this it says, judges and officers you should place in all your gates, on all the gates that a person has. A person needs to place judges and officers, top of the page test. What's the idea of the difference between the judges and the officers? Shoftim hu inyan piskei din ha'Torah. The first thing is we need to know halacha. The Rebbe says every single time it comes like 30 days before a Yom Tov. He says 30. Now it's going to be 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. We got to study the halachas of Rosh Hashanah. 30 days before Sukkot, we have to study the halachas of Sukkot, etc., etc. So we need to know, and we need to have the judges, the piskei dinim of the Torah, the halachas of the Torah, shal yodam yodim v'sem muter v's'asur. That through these halachas we know what's permitted and what's prohibited. And on a broader sense, the idea of judges, what does a judge do? A judge analyzes and understands and figures out what the halacha is and what we need to do. The idea of judges is our avodas Hashem in such a type of way where we serve Hashem based on understanding. We have an intellectual understanding of Hashem. We appreciate Hashem. That is the idea of the avodah of shoftim, that have an understanding of godliness. And officers, is like Rashi explains, that their idea is to rule by the power of the stick. In other words, to enforce the laws. So, contrasting with the avodah of havana v'asagah, the avodah of understanding godliness, appreciating godliness, and so on. U'inyan avodah the kabbalah soil. There's the avodah of doing things regardless of our understanding, just accepting the yoke, just like you do what the officer tells you because of the thread of the stick, because he is the enforcer of the law. So he says in line 6, there is an idea that says always you should make the Yetzer Tov angry at, like attack the Yetzer Hara. What does that mean? It's insufficient just to be able to have the idea of understanding and comprehension. One also needs this type of Kabbalah oil, this type of, and I think in other places the Rebbe emphasizes what it says, la'olam yarkiz adam. It's a constant thing that a person needs to be in avodah of Kabbalah oil, despite how much I understand. So he says, Vishnei in Yonamelu, and these two components, both the idea of hasag, comprehension, the Kabbalah oil, and doing things because we're told to do it, Messiahim Zelazeh assist each other. One shouldn't think that it's contradictory. Either I'm serving Hashem because I understand Hashem, or understanding makes no difference what I understand. All I have to do is I have to do like a soldier. He says, no, they both assist and complement each other. This means that through Kabbalah soil, so then the understanding, comprehension becomes perfect. And this is the idea, like it says, Godel Talmud Shemevil Demaisa. The greatness of study is that it brings to action, because the Kabbalah's oil of action, the idea that I need to act on what I'm commanded to do, makes my understanding more practical. When a person knows they have to do a psak halacha, they need to come to a ruling of psak halacha because they need to do the right thing, so their understanding of the topic is deeper and greater. It's more practical, down to earth. And the same thing the other way around, that the understanding complements the Kabbalah oil. Through the understanding and comprehension, the Kabbalah oil comes down internally. Because the nature of Kabbalah's oil is that it's transcendent, it's makif, it's like a munah. I'm just doing it, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't permeate me. The idea of Chabad understanding is that it's bepnimius. It's something that comes down internally. So therefore, when I have the Havana V'asag in addition to Kabbalah's oil, so that which I'm doing with a Kabbalah's oil comes down into me, into a pnimius. Similar to what it says in the Chazal say, that we know David HaMelech was the king and Yoav was the chief of staff. He was the general of the army. So it says, David, if not for David HaMelech, who was the idea of Torah study and sitting and studying Torah at home in Eretz Yisrael, Yoav would not be going to war. That's the idea of Lo'ilam Yargis Chulu Kabbalah Soil. The war is the idea of always making angry, etc. The idea of Kabbalah Soil, doing things because you got to do it, enforcing the law. If not for Yoav going to war, David HaMelech would not have like the freedom of mind to be able to sit and learn Torah, understanding. So we see how just like those two complemented each other, so too in Avodah, it complements each other. Because of the pasuk continues, that these judges will judge the nation a righteous judgment. What does that mean, a righteous judgment? Behind this means when a person appoints judges and officers in all his 7 gates, to guard these gates, to guard at these gates, should not be used for matters of the opposite of klippim. When they're used for klippos, then these gates are called gates in the shadow of death. But instead, these gates were only used for matters of holiness. So then these gates are called gates of righteousness. These are 2 different expressions used in Sukkim. So then, when we have these guards at the gate, when we have these judges at the gate, so then he accomplishes what we said at the beginning of the Maimer, that the husband Hashem is known in these gates. So then his awareness and knowledge of Hashem becomes in the 2 explanations and manners that he explained earlier. This means it comes down the 50 gates of Bina and also the 32 paths of Chachma. The 50 gates of Bina, that's the intellect coming down to the emotions, that's the lower will. And the 32 gates, the paths of Chachma, that draws down from the higher will, that is beyond intellect. Because of like it concludes in the pasuk, so that you should live and inherit the land. The Eretz Umloshen Rotzen, we know the Chazal said, why is she called Eretz? Because she wanted to do the will of her Creator. So Eretz has to do with will. So the inheritance of the Eretz, the inheritance of the will, through this type of avodah of shoftim and שוטרים, becomes now both the lower will and also the upper will, the higher will. This is a preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Through this avodah of placing judges and officers in all your gates, and they will judge your nation a righteous judgment. Then we are going with true confidence and trust, and with joy, to the judgment of Rosh Hashanah. How come? Because we know that Hashem will judge His earth with righteousness, just like we had gates of righteousness. So Hashem also has the righteousness as well. The rest of the Maimer, it says, is missing over here. The conclusion of the Maimer is missing.